Uh, Hello, everyone. Just today once again. So today's the third review session based on last week's recording on the Four Noble Truths. So before we start the class, we'll begin with the preliminary prayer first. And I'll lead the prayer in English, and I request Tatiana La to kindly lead the prayer in Russian language. And we also have Diana La, who is the interpreter for this session, and we have Sirin Tuntupla, who is managing the Russian live stream right now. Thank you. Let us all begin our practice by setting a proper motivation which consists of three parts, while being mindful of both aspects, the object being visualized and the manner in which you visualize it. Refuge field. In the space in front of you, visualize Buddha Shakyamuni, His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama, and all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, or any or any other enlightened beings you regard with veneration. They are looking upon you with immense kindness and unconditional love, just as a mother looks upon her only child. Bodhicitta field. Visualize seated on either side of you, your kind parents, mother on the left and father on the right. Additionally, you are accompanied by all other dear mother sentient beings, leaving none aside, and you are leading them in this practice. The purpose of this practice to manifest the Buddha nature within you, which is the ultimate source of happiness, by removing the two mental obscurations, afflictive obscurations consisting of the afflictions of negative emotions, contaminated karmas and their corresponding active seeds, and cognitive obscurations, the subtle stains, that is, inactive latent seeds of the afflictions and contaminate karmas. Let us all recite the following verses while mentally invoking their profound meanings and associated experiences. Enthused by great compassion, you taught the Immaculate Dharma to dispel all perverted views. To you, the Buddha Gautama, I pay homage. Enthused by great compassion, you taught the Immaculate Dharma to dispel all perverted views. To you, the Buddha Gautama, I pay homage. Enthused by great compassion, you taught the Immaculate Dharma to dispel all perverted views. To you, the Buddha Gautama, I pay homage. Taking refuge and generating bodhicitta. Sangye chuda choge sonamla chanjo bado tangne gyapso che tage jinso gebe sonam ge dola benje sangye doba sho sangye chuda choge sonamla chanjo bado tangne gyapso che tage jinso gebe sonam ge dola benje sangye doba sho Sangye chuda choge sonamla chanjo bado tangne gyapso che tage jinso gebe sonam ge dola benje sangye doba sho I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, Dharma, and the Sangha. By my accumulations of the practice of giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, Dharma, and the Sangha. By my accumulations of the practice of giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, Dharma, and the Sangha. By my accumulations of the practice of giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. In dependent origination, there is no ceasing, no arising, no annihilation, no permanence, no coming, no going, no separateness, and no sameness. I prostrate to the consummate Buddha, the supreme among all teachers, the one who taught this peace, which is freed of elaborations. I prostrate to the mothers of the hearers, the Bodhisattvas and the Buddhas, which through the knowledge of all lead hearers seeking pacification to complete peace, which through the knowledge of paths causes those helping migrators to achieve the aims of the world, and through the possession of which helps subduers expound a variety of teachings. The one who is transformed into the reliable guide, motivated by altruism and benefits sentient beings, the teacher, Sukata, and protector, to you I make prostrations. The one who has eliminated the web of conceptualization and is endowed with the divine bodies of the vast and the profound, who eternally shines forth the forever noble light rays, to you, the Buddha, I make prostrations. Inspired by wisdom and compassion, today in the Buddha's presence, I generate the mind of full awakening for the benefit of all sentient beings. Let us all recite the essence of the dependent origination mantra along with Geshe-la's recording.
Om ye dharma hetu prabhava hetum tesham tathagato yavatat tesham chayo nirodha evam vati mahashramanaye swaha. Om ye dharma hetu prabhava hetum tesham tathagato yavatat tesham chayo nirodha evam vati mahashramanaye swaha. Om ye dharma hetu prabhava hetum tesham tathagato yavatat tesham chayo nirodha evam vati mahashramanaye swaha.
The meaning of this Tentel Nyingpo mantra is all phenomena arises from causes. The causes are taught by the Tathagata. The cessation of the causes as well is taught by the great seer. Profound, peaceful, elaboration-free, clear light, and non-composite. Such is the nectar-like Dharma I've discovered. Finding no one to fathom this teaching, in silence I will retire into the woods. Beyond utterance, thought, and expression is the perfection of wisdom, which is unborn, unceased, and has the nature of space. It is the object of apprehension of self-realized wisdom. To you, the mother of the Buddhas of the three times, I pay obeisance. The four seals of Buddha's teaching. All composite things are impermanent. All contaminated things are of the nature of suffering. All phenomena are of the nature of emptiness and selflessness. Transcending sorrow is peace. The Guru is the Buddha, the Guru is the Dharma, likewise the Guru is the Sangha. The Guru is the source of everything wholesome. I go for refuge in the Guru. By the sound of the vibrant drum of Dharma, you liberate all beings of miseries. I beseech you to kindly remain and give teachings until the end of the expanse of billions of eons. The Buddha does not wash the negativities of beings, nor does he remove their miseries by his hands. His spiritual realizations are not transferred to them. It is by teaching the truth of suchness that beings are liberated. With folded hands, I beseech the Buddhas of all directions to shine the light of Dharma for all bewildered in misery's gloom. Instructions on parting from the four attachment. If you are attached to this life, you are not a spiritual practitioner. If you are attached to samsara, you have no renunciation. If you are attached to your own self-interest, you have no bodhicitta. If there is grasping, you do not have the view. We'll now recite the Heart Sutra along with the Geshe-la's recording.
Om Gati Gati Paragati Parasamgati Bodhi Swaha Tyata Om Gati Gati Paragati Parasamgati Bodhi Swaha Tyata Om Gati Gati Paragati Parasamgati Bodhisvaha Tyatha 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 Om Gati Gati Paragati Parasamgati Bodhisvaha.
Thank you. We'll now start with the actual class.
Thank you, Legna. Thank you, Sarin-la, Tatiana-la, Diana-la. Hello to everybody. Kashidale. I think most of you are joining. I can see most of you are joining. You've joined the earlier classes, but there are many new faces who've taken late admission. So you may have seen the review classes earlier, or maybe interacted with me over email. I'm Dipesh Thakkar. I'm the chief coordinator and also one of the people who will take review classes. So, without wasting time, we have a lot to cover the two classes. And before we go into the review class, actually, like I mentioned last time, these prayers that we do, many of these verses in the prayers are from, either sutras or some homage verses written by the great Nalanda masters in their text. So, the meaning is very, very condensed and very compact. So we may not be able to unpack the whole meaning as we recite, but at least you start getting to familiarize yourself with these verses. Slowly, as we go along, in some classes, Keshla may have explained these verses. If not, and if I get time, I'll slowly try and explain. For now, we should not take these prayers as anything religious that we keep mentioning, like in earlier review classes, Keshla also mentions. Take them as, a means to, fulfill aspiration of achieving 0% suffering and 100% happiness. Okay. All right. So don't take it in a religious way. Take it in a very logical way that, listen, I don't want suffering and I'm looking for infinite happiness. So let me be open to this option. Okay. So that's what I would request everybody. So let me know if you can please share the PPT. Okay, I think it's coming up. Thank you. Let's go to the third slide. So let's go to the next slide. So in this review class, we're going to revise what the two recordings we released last Monday, not today, what we released last Monday. Okay, and you would see it if it's confusing for some of you. Like we are releasing the recordings from the previous courses. So the recordings would have a date which is not current. It's when the actual class happened. So the two recordings we are reviewing today are 12th June and 15th June 2022 classes from NCC1. Okay. Yes, Megwana, let's go to the third slide. Next slide, please. So what I'll do is, like in every review class, I'll quickly, next slide. Next slide. So what we'll do is I'll try and quickly, revise what we've done in the earlier classes. Some of it may appear repetition, but it's good for people to be little, aware what was happening earlier. Some people may be joining the course late, so for them it's not a repetition. So what we've covered so far, the important points are that we all have two aspirations, something that we should check ourselves. What are the two aspirations? That we are looking for 0% suffering or 0% miseries, and we're looking for infinite happiness. And of course, is it possible? That should be the question. And the answer is yes. So we have to explore this, that is it possible? But the answer is, Buddha said, yes, it's possible. And there are beings who have achieved it, and Buddha was not the first one. So this is certainly possible. Buddha was the first one to turn the wheel of dharma on this planet Earth, but it's certainly possible. And why we are not experiencing 0% miseries right now and 100% happiness? Because we have two obscurations. The gross one is called afflictive obscuration, and the subtle one is called cognitive obscurations. So there are people who have these two goals, that they want to achieve 0% suffering, which is also called total fearlessness. And in technical terms, it's called nirvana. The English word would be like personal liberation. And the goal of achieving infinite happiness, you have to first achieve 0% suffering and then infinite happiness. When the goal is like infinite happiness, the first goal is automatically included. So that is infinite happiness. In technical term, it's Buddhahood. Again, it's nothing to do religious. Buddha is a Sanskrit word which means fully awakened. Fully awakened from what? Fully awakened from our ignorance and all mental states. And we will gradually go deeper and deeper into what these mental states are as we go, not only in NCC, like Nalanda Diploma course, which is a slightly longer form of the same topics, almost same topics that we're covering in NCC, and the Nalanda Master's course. And there are two types of practitioners, the personal liberation seekers and Mahayana seekers, Mahayana practitioners. Mahayana practitioners are the ones who are aiming to achieve the full enlightenment or Buddhahood. Okay. And we all have the seed of perfection, which is called Buddha nature. And we learned in the last class what is a proliferating Buddha nature and natural Buddha nature, the two divisions. I'll not go too much in detail, otherwise, we'll not be able to cover the classes that we are supposed to. But this is what we covered. And then we also covered, there's a slight typo, it should be 3 higher trainings, not training, 3 higher trainings and 3 baskets that we covered. The 3 higher trainings, we are dividing, what is sheel or practice of morality, samadhi, these are Sanskrit words. Samadhi is practice of concentration. Pragya is a Sanskrit word, practice of wisdom, right? So we have these 3 trainings, and we have these are the contents, and we have the 3 containers, right? So we have the Vinaya, which is the container, which contains the teachings on practice of morality. We have a Sutra, which is the container, which is a practice of concentration, right? We have Abhidharma, the container for the practice of practices related to the wisdom. So we have 3 higher trainings and the 3 baskets. 3 baskets are the containers, and 3 higher trainings are the contents of these baskets or containers. Okay. And one of the points I mentioned, meaning of going to refuge in Triple Gem. In the last review class, we were running short of time, so I mentioned that we'll cover it in the next class. So today I'll just spend like 2-3 minutes of, just few minutes on this. So here, there can be like extensive teachings on this. What does it mean to go to the refuge? Triple gem here means Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, right? So the analogy given in text by Arya Maitreya is supposed to be the next Buddha who will come on planet Earth. So he wrote a text, and this text he mentioned, like, consider Buddha as a doctor. We consider ourselves as somebody who's sick, and we go to a doctor. So Buddha is like a doctor, Sangha is like the nurses or the supporting community which will allow us to heal, and Dharma is like the real medicine, right? And of course, like, I go to a doctor, I'm sick, the doctor gives me prescription, I get my medicines from a pharmacy, and the medicines are lying on my table. If I don't take the medicine, it's not going to benefit me. Right? So you have Buddha, Dharma, Buddha, Sangha, and Dharma. Dharma is the real medicine. Right? Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. So Dharma is the real medicine which actually helps us to get rid of our mental defilements and to take steps towards this, goal of 0% misery, and infinite happiness. Okay, so and then Geshe-la in not the recording that we released last week, but the week before that, in that class, Venerable Geshe-la mentioned that when you go to refuge, then we have to be careful where we're going for refuge. If you go for refuge in people who do not understand what total fearlessness or nirvana is, who do not understand what Buddhahood or infinite happiness is, how will they help us, right? So that's a very important point, that one should be smart enough and wise enough to seek help, from the people who are capable of giving that help, right? So there are, and then this is all relative. There's sometimes some people, uh, may be able to give you partial help, not the full help that you're looking for. So one should be wise enough. But that was a very important point Geshe-la mentioned about refuge. I remember in one of the books, I remember that there were people, which the numbers have reduced, but there are many people who will cross the Himalayas from the Tibet and then come to Dharamshala. I think there is one particular center where the Tibetan refugees go, and the Tibetan government in exile receives them. There's a separate department. So I remember reading one of the books, that there was one gentleman who crossed the Himalayas, something like that, and then he had an opportunity to meet with His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And then he asked that His Holiness just give me teaching on how to go for refuge. And His Holiness was so happy that somebody is asking such a question, right? So of course, there the person is already a Buddhist, so the connotation can be taken in terms of not only logically, but the person has a great amount of devotion also, right? So for many of us, we do not belong to, like, we are formally not Buddhist, like I'm born in a Hindu family, and I'm learning these things, for my benefit, and I find it beneficial. So you have to take it the way you feel is comfortable. So refuge often can also be misunderstood by people as something like a conversion, but here that's not the meaning. The idea is you seek help based on your aspiration. That's the idea. So if I have a serious, problem in my brain, then I don't go and see a urologist, or I don't go see a cardiologist. I have to go either see a neurosurgeon or a neurologist. That's the idea. Okay. So that was one point which was missing from the previous, review session. And then Geshe-la touched upon, in the last classes, that Buddha taught the Four Noble Truths on the basis of 12 recitations, which we've done earlier. The 12 recitations are in form of 3 groups. Group 1 is based on just identification. Group 2 based on practices related, and Group 3 based on result, right? So we've covered quite a lot of ground, and then we also covered the 3 types of suffering, although we did not go into details of 3 types of suffering. In this review class, we will do that, but this is what we covered in the last few sessions. Okay, that was a quick recap. Now we'll go into what Geshe-la covered in the first recording, which was released, understanding suffering of change, using example of the prison. So this was quite important, and before I go, I mentioned this in my review class earlier, that if you have, who are doing this course, let's say you have enough time to cover all the material, right? Then you should listen to Geshe-la's classes, the recordings we are releasing, or the live classes, and you can listen or you can use transcripts. Unfortunately, on the Russian side, we do not have transcript, but at least the recordings are there. You should listen to that, and then of course, if you have time, then also come to this review session. It will be surely beneficial. I'm not saying because I'm taking it, but you get a quick recap. There's a question answer that makes a difference, right? And so those are the people who have sufficient time. Then you belong to that, no, I have little less time, so it's okay not to attend the review class, but at least listen to Geshe-la's classes. Okay, so try your best to listen to Geshe-la's classes. Don't jump directly that, okay, I will not listen to Geshe-la's classes and come to the review class. It will not be so beneficial. I just have 1.5 hours to cover something like Geshe-la spent like 5-6 hours in those recordings. It's not possible for me to go the same amount of depth, same amount of level of interaction Venerable Geshe-la does in those classes. Okay, so it's for your own benefit. Structure your time accordingly. Okay, so now I think going into understanding suffering of change. Like if you heard the class, what I was saying is that Geshe-la does a lot of interaction with the participants, and which is extremely helpful when you listen to the class, because you may have similar point of view which the other participants are saying. Yeah, this is what suffering of change means. Yeah, this is what it means. And then it will uncover what you're thinking, what your natural thinking is. If you guys knew everything about this, you would not come to such a course, right? So we come with our own concepts, we come with our own natural thinking about things, and the natural thinking may be that I don't know. That's also fine. The natural thinking can be something exactly opposite to how it was explained by Buddha and how Geshe-la is teaching it. Your natural thinking may be 50% how Geshe-la is teaching it. It can vary from person to person, right? But this is one of the most important point of this Nalanda tradition, that we have this ability with the sense of openness. I naturally think like this, but let me be open, let me listen what is being said, and let me scrutinize. Does it make sense? Does it not make sense? Right? If you just say, no, this doesn't make sense. If you start like this, you will never learn anything. You will never ever learn anything. If you already knew, then what's the point of joining the course, right? If with the natural thinking, you were right, be open, listen, scrutinize, and then you can give your reasons, I do not agree. That's perfectly fine. And then also give your reasons why you don't agree. Then somebody may be able to explain you're not agreeing because of the wrong reasons, right? So this sense of openness, this sense of inquisitiveness with the great amount of having respect, not having disrespect for what is being taught. It's an amazing amount of, a gain in mental transformation, I would say. Great amount of gain you will have in mental transformation that you can carry not only just studying something like this kind of a course, you can carry in your profession also. You can carry in your relationships also. What the other person is saying, let me listen. What is their point of view? Let me listen. Right? In one of the classes, Geshe-la gave a very beautiful example, very simple. But let's say if I say 2 plus 3 is equal to 7, right? Then you can at least listen to me. What did I say? If I ask you, what did I say? Then you will say 2 plus 3 equal to 7. Then the second question I may ask, do you agree with it? Then you can say, no, I don't agree with it. 2 plus 3 is equal to 5. But at least you listen to me that 2 plus 3 is equal to 7. That's what I said. Right? It's a very simple example, but so at least we learn this ability to listen and be open. Okay. So understanding this suffering of change. The example given in the class was example of prison. So let's say you have two prison and you have two prison guards. One is extremely horrible prison guard who's very, 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 I would say, nasty and does not let the prisoners, have peace of mind. And another prison guard, is managing a prison where there Geshe-la gave example of Starbucks or whatever you have local, coffee joint, if you like, or last time we spoke about cheesecake. If, there's your favorite place, where you go and eat your cheesecake and you have the same cafe or same place which gives you that cheesecake in a prison, right? And there are two prisoners, prisoners A and prisoners B, both are to be executed, let's say after 2 years, 3 years, something like that, right? And both are innocent by they've been put maybe something, cooked up stories or whatever, and they've put in the prison, right? So Geshe-la gave the example that the person who's in the nice prison will enjoy all the facilities, right? And person who's in the nasty prison will not enjoy, will be more enthusiastic to get out of prison. He or she will not forget that he has to be executed soon, right? So this is a very good example of suffering of change. Suffering of change can be understood as a bait. The English word bait, like Geshe-la mentioned in the class, bait has to be delicious. But bait is a bait only when the other person takes it. So this is like the example of suffering of change. The person who is in the nasty prison will always remember that, no, I have to get out. I'll be executed. I have to get out. I'll be executed. So he or she will look for a way to get out of the prison. But the person in a nice, prison, no, there's a swimming pool, there's nice cheesecake, there's nice coffee, the prison guard is so friendly, and then that person gets trapped. And suddenly, what will happen is that day comes, and then he or she will be informed, you are to be executed, right? So this is the example, given, and it's a very powerful example we have to apply in our lives, right? And then there was a very big statement made in the class that all happiness, all mundane happiness that we experience, they are all like bait, right? This is a very big statement being made. And, it can be, I would say, a little discomforting for some of you. Is it really? So what am I supposed to do? Now I'm learning that all mundane happinesses are contaminated, right? And the example, first we take the example of the prison, and I think we've taken the example of the dream earlier, if you remember. So in a dream, you can have like various episodes. Episode 1, which is like a nightmare. Episode 2, which is like a very pleasant dream. Episode 3, again, something can be a nightmare, right? So we are affected by the dream. Why are we affected? Because we do not realize that we are dreaming. We see the dream content as real, right? That is what affects us. And this is the example Buddha gave, that this is the way the happiness that you're experiencing, it's like a dream. And that's why it's contaminated by ignorance, that we are unaware that we are dreaming, and that's why we are affected by it, right? So now, in these teachings and Buddhist philosophy and all these profound things that we've never explored earlier, many times, Buddha and many of these teachers like Venerable Geshe-la, they give examples. Examples is not the real thing. But example is something that gives you an idea, Then, of course, like I said earlier, that you can question it. Then you can say, okay, this is an example. How do we know that what we do in the dream, the real life right now, it's like that, right? That's a separate question. The example is given. Then how do we establish the reality that we interact with, the experiences we have? That is also dreamlike. That's a separate question, because that requires tremendous amount of study. A lot of other information is required. But the hypothesis is, let's say, like I said, try and be open. Let's say if things are okay, even let's forget the reality, but at least in the dream, would everybody agree that if you are aware that you are dreaming, if you are seriously contemplate, let's say, remember a dream where you had a nightmare, right? Any dream, not necessarily that it has to be, a very recent one. Anytime from your past, if you remember you had a nightmare, but the hypothetical question I'm asking is, if you were aware while you were dreaming that you were dreaming, would you be having a similar experience as a nightmare? That would be my question. So I repeat the question. Let's say I remember, okay, maybe 20 years ago, I had a horrible nightmare. I can vividly remember it right now. And then I woke up, it was really bad nightmare. And I woke up, it was all, I was literally sweating. And it was not summers. I was literally sweating. It was that bad. Physiological reactions were there because of the dream. But if I ask myself during that nightmare, if I knew I was dreaming, and I'm 100% confident that I would not have been affected by it, right? So that's why this example is very powerful. Like I said, now how do I prove, or how does anybody prove that this example applies to real life? That's a secondary question. You keep that aside for the time being. If you are really interested, then you have to put the effort of studying the topic of emptiness in great detail. Then you will be able to cover that how this reality is similar to dream. It's not dream, but it's similar to dream. how things appear to us and how we are deceived by it, right? So we talk about that later. So this is the same thing that contaminated happiness is. So think about it very seriously. If I had this experience of being aware that it was a dream, I will not be affected. And this is what Buddha is saying, that if you become aware about how things exist in reality, you will not be affected by it. Okay, so so that's why, you know, this word contaminated happiness or mundane happiness as a bait, right? There are many connotations of contaminated. I'm bringing out one connotation, which is contaminated. Okay, so now often when people hear about suffering of change, the next important point is that how do we integrate what we are learning, you know, into our lives, right? So should we like say, okay, now from today onwards, I've learned all contaminated happiness, all mundane happiness is contaminated. It's like a bait. So no cheesecake. Is there anybody who will say that? No cheesecake from tomorrow? No? Okay, so let's not do that, right? So we go slow. This is what Gishla said, that we go slow. We have to understand things. And then most important is that when we come to this course, we are not saying, nobody said, I hope nobody's come here with this aspiration that, hey, I have too much of happiness. Please teach me how to give my happiness away. I don't want happiness, right? We don't wake up in the morning and say, okay, now I'll be unhappy today. We don't say that, right? So we have to be very honest to ourselves that my aspiration is that I'm not looking for any kind of problems. I'm not looking, at least I'm not looking for problems. And then if I can be happy, of course I like it. So that's the reality. And then right now, if all these mundane happiness make me happy, then you have to admit it. You have to slowly work on discovering. And what Buddha is saying, he's not inventing a new reality. Buddha just discovered it and explained it in form of teachings. Like quantum physics. Quantum physics is not creating a new reality. Quantum physics, they are discovering a subtle reality. Right? They're not inventing it. They're saying this is how things exist at a quantum level. These are the rules, and they're still discovering. Right? So, like you know, Newton discovered gravity. It said, right? So, is it that the gravity did not exist before Newton discovered it? Of course not. Gravity was there all the time. So similarly, all these things, that contaminated happiness that we're learning as a bait, you know, there's something, a potential within us to experience infinite happiness. This is the reality. Buddha is not inventing it. Okay. So what Geshe-la mentioned, that let's take an example of somebody who wants to, let's say, you know, I don't know, in your country, which are the professions which are very difficult in terms of, like, you have to prepare a lot. There's an entrance exam, and then you have to, you know, do a lot of hard work. Let's say you're in high school, like in India, you know, if you want to do become a medical doctor from certain institutes, you know, it's quite difficult to get admission. You have to be really top notch student, you know, and not only a student in your school grades, but there is a separate entrance exam. They will test you on, you know, your lot of abilities, comprehension, technical abilities. Like in engineering, there will be certain institutes which are really sought after by the Indian kids, or medical institutes which are sought by, you know, Indian kids who really study, you know, tremendous amount of time they spent from 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, 4 grades at least, you know, they're studying 16 hours, 18 hours a day. So if we take this example where somebody is studying like this so seriously, so for them, going to a party, going to a mall, you know, wasting time in these things or spending time, it's a waste of time for them. Would you agree? Right? Would you agree that these people who have a certain goal in mind, and the other activities are a waste of time for them, right? And there are kids who are like, okay, no, I'll just take it easy, and I'm going to go party, I'm going to mall, hang out with friends. Yeah, for them, because the goal is not there. For this kid, the goal is there, right? So same way that when we learn these things, how do we integrate? There are certain things which are conducive for our goal and also our current capacity, right? So we have to know who we are, what our level is, right? And then whatever is conducive right now may become unconducive later, or whatever is unconducive right now may become conducive later, right? So for the other example, I think Gishla also gives, not an NCC. It's like, you want to become like a world-class boxer, right? You want to become a world-class boxer. So initially, you will start training, physical training, and then you have to go into a boxing ring, and you get like punches, right? So initially, if this kid who wants to become a boxer is put against the best boxer, it's too much hard punches. Not very good idea. Initially, it has to be little soft punches, build the strength, and then the hard punches come later. So initially, soft punches is conducive, and hard punches are unconducive. But later on, when the kid has grown or this person has become a professional and everybody just gives soft punches, it is unconducive, right? So it depends on the person's capability, aspiration, where this person is. So that's very, very important. Okay. So I would strongly encourage that we listen to this class, what Geshla mentioned. And if you've listened it, wonderful. If you want to revise the transcript, because there were a lot of things, a lot of time Geshla spent on this point. Okay. So kindly make sure that you do. Like the review classes, I have less time, so I won't be able to spend too much of time there. Okay. Then the example of the dream, like I mentioned, right? That why, any kind of attachment aversion that we have, it is a loss of freedom. This is an extremely important point. Understanding the subtle concept behind what is a misery, what is a suffering. What we understand misery as something like, okay, I have a headache, maybe I lost my job, or I lost a near dear one, there was a separation, these kind of things which everybody will identify as suffering, right? Buddha went much deeper into it, and this is one point, like, if I have attachment, like cheesecake, I have attachment to it, right? Then my mind is automatically pulled towards it. I see it and I want it. I find it delicious. There's nothing wrong enjoying the cheesecake. Here, the only point being made is it's involuntary. It's not voluntary. When it's involuntary, there's a loss of freedom. You don't have a choice, right? And Geshla in the class asked that, okay, let's say, we all decide, let's say that, okay, let's visualize a dream where we all together with His Holiness and we're having a nice time with His Holiness. We go to Dharamshala. Gesha said, okay, is it a nice dream? Yes, it's a nice dream. Now the next question is, how many of us will, whatever we're thinking of a pleasant dream, we will have that dream tonight? Do you have a choice that you say, okay, I'll dream of this today? Right? We don't have a choice. It's kind of involuntary. And moment you say it's involuntary, there's a loss of freedom. You yourself are not deciding it. You don't have freedom. And when you understand the situations in this context, that it's a loss of freedom, then the mind changes. Your mind starts seeing the same experience as like, okay, I don't have control over it, or I don't have freedom over it. Right? It's a very profound way of seeing things. Right? So often in the 3 levels of suffering, it is mentioned, the first one everybody will identify, even animals identify. Any kind of physical, mental pain, they identify. Suffering of change, it's even harder to identify. Still, there are few practitioners who do identify. They're not looking to achieve 0% suffering or total fearlessness and infinite happiness, but yet they are able to identify these experiences as suffering of change. Okay. And then the most difficult one is the 3rd level of, which is pervasive condition suffering, which we will cover later. But this pervasive condition suffering also has this connotation of loss of freedom. Right? You don't have a control. I don't have a control. It's our pervasive condition suffering which is dictating terms. Right? And it's a pervasive condition suffering that we will cover in the next slide. Okay, so this example of the dream is very powerful again, right? And like I said, keep this aside for the time being. How do I know things are like dream? Keep it aside for the time being, but reflect on this point that if things were like this, then it certainly makes sense. If I become aware that everything is dreamlike, so much of freedom. Right? How can things affect me? Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so now I think I mentioned about this pervasive condition suffering. This is the third. So right now where we are on the first recitation. Just to set the context, that Buddha in the first recitation just said he was identifying. He was identifying that this is the truth of suffering. This is the truth of cause of suffering. Just the identification part is going on. So we're still at the first truth. We are trying to identify. Okay, and within the suffering there are three levels. So we've covered suffering of suffering, which we don't need to cover so much. We all instinctively through our experiences, everybody will say, I don't want a headache, I don't want this illness, I don't want that illness, I don't want this experience, I don't want fights with my near and dear ones, I don't want people to say nasty things to me. We'll all agree, right? And then now we've covered suffering of change. Now we're going to the third level of suffering, which is pervasive condition suffering. Okay, so first Geshe-la said, he gave examples. And what are the illustrations of pervasive condition suffering? The involuntary birth in samsara. This, people joining, if you had covered NCC1 already. In NCC1, we did not have the wheel of life topic. Geshe-la often goes quite detailed in wheel of life, in Nalanda diploma courses, which is a slightly longer version, about 1.5 years. So this time in NCC2, we've included Wheel of Life, which Geshe-la will cover directly. We're not going to release any recordings. Geshe-la will teach us sometime March, April. We'll announce the schedule, most likely April sometime. Okay. So this involuntary birth in samsara, we will get to know in detail through Wheel of Life. How, we take birth in samsara and how it is involuntary. Okay. Then the second point, being under the sway of contaminated karmas and afflictions. And I'll explain each one. These are the three illustrations Geshe-la gave in the class. Involuntary birth in samsara, being under the sway of contaminated karmas and afflictions, and contaminated neutral feelings. Okay. So to explain this, we have to see like how Buddha explained, like we say, okay, there's a universe, in the universe, like we are on planet Earth, we are part of solar system is part of Milky Way, there are so many other galaxies, things like that. So Buddha also explained there are three realms, right? The first realm which we are in, which is called the desire realm, or in Sanskrit, Kamalok, then the second realm is form realm, Rupa Lok, again Sanskrit, and then Arupa Lok is formless realm. Now, what are these? So desire realm is where we habituate. The predominant tendency of people or beings in this desire realm is, they are affected by the external senses. Like we have the five senses, like eyes, ears, nose, taste, and the body, all these senses, we are affected by it. And our mind goes after these sensual pleasures or sensual experiences. So that's the predominant, part of desire realm. Then you have the form and formless. To take birth in form and formless, there are very specific meditation concentration practices. It's not like today I decide, okay, now next life I want to get birth in form realm. No, you have to practice a certain level of concentration. And you have to achieve that certain level of concentration, which it classifies you to take a birth in there, right? And then, like, somebody dies, like this life, they're human being, and they get these teachings or instructions how to achieve, they achieve. And then if they die, and this particular concentration becomes their karma to take birth in that realm, they take birth in that realm. They are not interested in these external sensual experiences that normal desire realms have. They are deep into samadhi concentration practices. Okay. So for example, if in the life story of Buddha, if you remember, Prince Siddhartha, the first two teachers who taught Prince Siddhartha, they had achieved a certain concentration from the formless realm. And Buddha was very clear that no, I have achieved this, but this does not get me to the bottom of the problem. What is the bottom of the problem? The bottom of the problem is, why do we have suffering? I'm looking for the permanent solution to the suffering for me and everybody else. Just achieving this concentration does not solve my problem. Right? So imagine the kind of tradition and the culture it was then. You go to a guru, teacher, a teacher teaches you, you realize what the teacher has taught you. And then you very politely ask the teacher, but this is not what I came to look for. And teacher says, I can't teach you more. This is the maximum I know. Right? So much of openness, so much of honesty. And then Prince Siddharth, was so determined and so mentally clear that what he wanted to achieve. Right? So desire realm, you have form and formless, and each form and formless, they're further divided into four. I've given it in that chart. You can look at it. Keshla did not explain further, but these are studied in great detail in the Nalanda Master's course. In Nalanda Diploma course, again, Keshla explains how you achieve it, the basic concept behind it, but Nalanda Master's course, all the technical details are there. Specifically in the text Abhisamaya Alankara, the ornament of clear realization, again a text by Arya Maitreya there, and this text is also studied in the great monastic, the Tibetan monastic universities. It's one of the 5 great texts that is studied. There, it's like quite detailed what these form, formless, how one achieves, what is the qualification. Okay, so now we've learned about the 3 sufferings, right? So why in the pervasive conditioned suffering, why is it called pervasive? There are 3 words. The 3rd level suffering: pervasive, conditioned, and suffering. Why is it called pervasive? Because if we know this is what, and this is comprehensive. There is nothing outside desire, form, and formless. Okay, so there's nothing outside. And in desire also, Geshe-la gave basically the subdivisions. God, goddess realm, this is one. There are 6 subdivisions of the desire realm. So I will not go into detail. You can read it, whoever's interested, because for some of you it may be too much detail. At least there are 6 subdivisions. Okay. Perhaps I'll go into it because there's a very important point which I'd like to mention. So you have God, goddess realm, and it's nothing to do with the creator God. In certain theistic religions or theistic traditions, you have a creator God concept. Here we're talking about God as somebody, not as a creator, but again part of samsara, but yet their karma was extremely good that they're born in certain like heavenly abodes, you can say that. And then you have the demigods. Demigods are in Sanskrit asuras. They're there, and we are in the human realm. And then animal realm also, we can see quite a lot of animals. We can't see many of them, but at least like many animals that we can see, right? And there are 2 more realms: hungry ghost and hell. So in terms of suffering, hell is like the worst, right? We use this in day-to-day English. Yeah, go to hell or hell-like experience. So literally there are, and these are not mental experiences. These are physical places where people are born. And they're extremely excruciating descriptions given in many texts, how beings suffer and what kind of realms are there. Okay. So the important point I want to mention is that, once we get a little bit of conviction, like about rebirth and things like that, but to get a human birth is extremely difficult if you keep this even in the desire realm. Statistically or numerically, the numbers that are given, the hungry ghost and hell far outnumber like animals also. And just on planet Earth, we're talking about animals, right? So let's say, I don't know if you know, right? There are creatures like krills, which these blue whales eat. They are born like in trillions and billions when they're born. You can see them from the satellite. They're like bright red color. I don't know if you've seen on Discovery or National Geographic, and these blue whales, like they gulp like, millions of them were together. So just one creature, just think about ants. There's so many, and yet hungry ghost and hell like outnumber. So the human birth that we get, it's very rare, and then having a human birth and having the ability to have this kind of opportunity where we want to work on our mind to become better beings, it's even rarer, right? So it's something that I wanted to mention that was not mentioned in the class, but it's extremely important to rejoice and feel happy that we have this opportunity. Okay. So now going back to pervasive condition suffering, pervasive condition suffering. No. Yeah, stay on the previous slide. Yeah, Lemon. Okay. Yeah. No. Where the chart is, Lemon. Where the chart is. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So why it's pervasive? Now we see the three types of suffering. The suffering of suffering. It's only experienced by beings in the desire realm. Right? Suffering of change. It's experienced by beings in the desire realm, and in the form realm, you divide into four. Form realm is divided into first concentration, second concentration, third concentration, and the fourth concentration. Okay, so suffering of change is only experienced in the desire realm and the first three form realm. It is not experienced in the fourth form concentration and any of the formless. And the pervasive condition suffering that we're talking about, it is experienced or it exists in all the realms. So hence the word pervasive. It pervades all realms. Suffering of change and suffering of suffering is not pervasive across samsara. Okay, so that explains the first word. Conditioned, condition can be understood by many connotations, but conditions by afflictions, like, conditioned like the example of the dream. In the dream, we are conditioned by our ignorance. As long as we have ignorance, we will see the dream content as real. Right? And then we'll go into the next class. When we go, Geshla will explain with the dream example how all this operates in the mind. And suffering, like I explained in the previous slide, there's a loss of freedom. We don't have freedom. As long as you have ignorance, you don't have freedom. You don't have freedom to choose the dream. You don't have freedom to not react. If you see the dream content as real, you do not have a choice not to react. Even if you train yourself, no, I will not react, I'll remain neutral. Still, you remaining neutral in the dream, you're not realizing that you're dreaming. Right? So still that's ignorance. Okay? So that's why it's called pervasive condition suffering. And this is the subtlemost suffering. So wherever Buddha is talking about this is suffering, and then we'll cover later in the next week, Geshla introduces 4 seals, and 4 seals also this will come. So when we cover that, there also Buddha is mentioning, when Buddha says this is suffering or this is the truth of suffering, he's talking about, he's talking about the suffering, which is the pervasive condition suffering. Okay. All right. Okay. So this is what we've covered in this session. Now we go to the next session. Yeah, next slide, please. Okay. So, I'm not going to go because there was a gap. If you see 12th June class was there first, now is the next 15th June. So Keshla spent quite a lot of time doing a quick review, which I think we are in the same flow. So I'm not going to do the quick review, and then, Geshla covered also the truth of cause of suffering. Cause of suffering are karmas, and afflictions. And for that, Geshla quoted Arya Nagarjuna. From Mula Madhyamika Karika. This is a very famous text of Arya Nagarjuna, the fundamental wisdom of the middle way. And this is the verse Geshla, His Holiness, often, quotes this particular verse. Ceasing of karmas and afflictions is nirvana. Karmas and affliction arise from conceptual thoughts, brackets in inappropriate conceptualization. These arise from material, these arise from mental elaborations, grasping at true existence. Elaboration cease by or into emptiness. Both are correct. By or into emptiness. Both are correct. Okay. So, so basically, Geshe explained this particular verse in 5 steps. Okay, so what are the 5 steps? Here we're talking about, ceasing of karmas and affliction is nirvana. On one side you have nirvana, and on the other side, opposite of nirvana is samsara. Samsara and miseries are synonymous. Okay, so samsara and miseries are synonymous. So ceasing of karmas and afflictions. Karmas and afflictions are the cause for our sufferings. So when they cease, of course, the suffering cannot arise. So that's nirvana. Karmas and afflictions, which are the cause, how do they arise? They arise from conceptual thought. And we will cover this through an example. What do you mean by conceptual thought? And again, let me warn you that there are things which are written in English. Some of them are technical words. So anything which is a technical word, we should not interpret in our own ways. Technical words, you have to ask, what does this mean? Okay, so Keshla will explain now as we go along. Keshla will explain, that through an example Keshla gave, we will quickly cover that example. And these conceptual thoughts, how do they arise? They arise from, mental elaboration. Also, mental elaboration are mentioned, inappropriate attention. Okay, inappropriate attention. That inappropriate attention is a technical word. Okay, and then they cease into emptiness. So the 5 steps, the 5 points I'm going to elaborate, which Geshla mentioned. You have samsara or suffering. They arise, immediate causes, contaminated karmas. Contaminated karmas, then the immediate causes, gross afflictions. Gross affliction comes from inappropriate attention, and inappropriate attention comes from self-grasping ignorance. Okay, so these are the 5 points. The first point is the result, and the bottom 4 are the causes. I repeat, you have suffering, then you have contaminated karmas, then you have gross afflictions, then you have inappropriate attention, and then you have self-grasping ignorance. These are the 5 points. Okay. So now Geshla gave a very good example. Let's say Geshla said that in the class, there are 2 people, and Geshla has a new phone, an iPhone, and it's kind of happening in a dream. One second, just 1 second. Sorry about this. So what we were talking about, that Geshla gave this example of the dream, right? And there are 2 people, and Geshla's got a nice phone, a new phone, and then one person says, Geshla, can I have the phone? The other person says, no. You know what? I asked Geshla first, right? And they start fighting, and this is all happening in, like, let's say, Tibet House. They're fighting. There's a fist fight. Police has to intervene, and both are put behind bars. Right? So behind bars or in the prison, it's like suffering. Why did it happen? Because they had a fist fight. Why did it happen? Because they were wanting to have the phone. And what kind of a phone? It was not real. It was a dream phone. It's all happening in dream. So they're seeing the dream phone as the real phone. And why they're seeing the dream phone as real phone? Because of the ignorance. Right? So these 5 points are there. So we can do an analogy. Prison equal to suffering. Coming from fist fight is equivalent to contaminated karmas. Contaminated karmas coming from gross affliction. What kind of affliction? The attachment for the phone, or an aversion for the other person. Oh, I don't like him. He also wants the phone. I want the phone. And there's an attachment. Why? There's an inappropriate attention. What kind of inappropriate attention? Like I said, this is the technical word. The mind is elaborations. These are elaborations. What kind of elaboration? Mind is not seeing the dream as dream. Mind is seeing dream as real. And when you see dream as real, why? Because of seeing dream as real, because of ignorance. Right? So all the 5 steps are there. Suffering, contaminated karmas. Contaminated karmas are fist fight. Gross affliction, which is attachment, aversion. Gross affliction because of inappropriate attention. Inappropriate attention. Why? Because seeing the dream as real. Why seeing dream as real? Because of ignorance. This is again a very profound summarization of how things are dreamlike. Okay, and this verse will come again and again. This verse will come again and again. Okay, so better, I think, if you can spend some time, look into it, try and revise it. Okay, so this covers the second truth, which is truth of cause of suffering. So these four are together the cause of suffering. Okay, and often the last three, which is the gross afflictions, inappropriate attention, and the ignorance, last three, they're combined together as afflictions. You can say the cause of suffering is contaminated karmas and afflictions. The root cause is the ignorance. The root or ultimate cause is the ignorance. Okay. So now this covers the cause of suffering. Then the third noble truth, the truth of cessation of suffering. Like we covered with the example of the doctor. I go to a doctor and I have a serious illness and I'm very worried. I go to the doctor, doctor diagnoses, hey, you have this illness because of this cause. Then my next question, can I be cured? Is this illness curable? Right? The doctor says, yes, it's curable. So this is the truth of cessation. What Buddha said, yes, all these miseries can come to an end. 0% suffering possible. Right? So that's why the truth of cessation of suffering. And Gishla mentioned cessation can be achieved at different levels. There are various levels. For example, let's say lockdown. Let's say maybe take an example of lockdown. I don't know if in your country, if you had a severe lockdown when the COVID was at that peak, right? It was a big suffering for many people, right? You can't go out, you can't do this, you can't do that. And when the lockdown is, opened up, everything is back to normal, you can move around. That suffering of lockdown is gone. We have not dealt with the root, but that suffering is gone. There's a cessation of lockdown for that particular COVID period, gone. Right? This is one level. Right? So that's also cessation. So you have a problem and maybe on its own or somehow that problem subsides, that cessation ends. You work in a particular company, you are working and you have a very bad set of people, as colleagues. So either you resign, join another company, that suffering with related to that company, gone. But does that solve the problem at the root? No. But at least the suffering is gone. That suffering is gone. That is one level. And second level is at a relative level. And Gishla gave a very nice example, which is a very famous story. One person goes to a guru, he's very tired of his kids making a lot of noise, and then the guru says, go and buy, a goat and go buy a chicken. If you, go through the story in the recording, then he just feels like he goes with the guru with a blind faith that whatever the guru is going to say, I will get some peace of mind. And guru is very smart. Guru first says go and buy chicken. Go and buy a goat. And the goat, makes a lot of noise, and makes things dirty. Children are more active. So the noise levels increase more. So he feels like, what is this? I went for peace and now I have more noise at home, more chaos at home. Then the guru gives another advice, buy chicken. And now the suffering multiplies. Then he says, get rid of the chicken, get rid of the goat. And now he's back to where he was before. He approaches the guru for the first time. And then he goes to guru and says that this is divine peace. Right? So it sounds very funny, but this is the way things are. It's relative, right? It's quite relative. If this lockdown we felt quite bad, I don't know, in future, you never know with the degeneration of environment and how things are going, we may have another severe type of viruses hitting, humans. Then this lockdown will appear much milder that we experienced. Then we say that lockdown was better than this. Right? It's all relative. So that's also, one is like problem stopping, and then one is relatively being able to see things. Then also the suffering kind of at least gets reduced quite a lot. That's also kind of cessation. And then the wisest approach is to look at the root cause and get rid of the root cause. And this is what Buddha is talking about. you know, right? So, I mean, for example, again, maybe we can go to example of, like, I have a stomach infection, and because of stomach infection, I have a headache. I can take a headache medicine. It will give me respite for a few hours, but then as long as I have the infection, it might give me a headache again. So I'd look at the root cause. What is the cause of the infection? What kind of bacteria I have to take the antibiotic, right? So cessation by removing the root of the problem, right? And then Geshla mentioned there are 3 types of cessation. Within personal liberation, like we covered in the previous class, people who seek personal liberation, you can further divide into 2. One are called Shravakas, the Sanskrit word Shravakas, or in English it's translated as hearers, people who hearers, who hear Buddha's teachings, and they, further go and spread Buddha's teachings. That's why they hear the teachings. Prateka Buddhas are solitary realizers. These 2 practitioners again fall in the personal liberation categories. Okay, and then you have the Mahayana practitioners who are aiming to achieve Buddhahood. And once they achieve their respective goals, they have the cessation of Shravaka, cessation of Prateka Buddha, and cessation of Mahayana practitioners. Okay, and how do they achieve? You have to follow certain practices. This is the truth of the path leading to the cessation. Okay, so let me know. Next slide, please. Legmana, are you there? Okay, thank you. Once again. So we'll come across this again and again. What is presented? If you heard, during our prayers, Legmana played the recording of the Heart Sutra mantra. Gate, gate, paragate, parasam gate, bodhiswa. There are 5 words there, important words. Gate, gate, paragate, parasam gate, bodhiswaha. These 5 words, Buddha was indicating the 5 paths: path of accumulation, path of preparation, path of seeing, path of meditation, path of no more learning. Right? So, for example, let's say if somebody decides to become or do a research scientist in, let's say, physics, some kind of a field in physics. So, what are they supposed to do? First, they're supposed to complete their middle school. Then they're supposed to complete their high school, and in the high school, they should have subjects which are related to science. At least physics should be there. Then, like in India and most countries, you'll have a bachelor's degree. Then you have a master's degree. And after master's degree, then maybe you do MPhil or something like, post-grad. You'll have something before the PhD. In some countries, you can, after master's, you can directly do the PhD degree, right? Then you become like a research person. So similarly, you have these paths: path of accumulation, path of preparation, path of seeing, path of meditation, path of no more learning. These are the 5 paths, and what happens on this path, how do you achieve this path, things like that. Those are again very detailed studies. But for now, Geshla introduced, these are called the 5 paths. And like we learned, you have cessation of Shravaka Buddhas. You have a cessation of Shravakas, you have a cessation of Prateka Buddhas, and you have cessation of Mahayana practitioners. There are 3, right? So each 3 of them will have 5 paths. So often, what is mentioned into 5 into 3, 15 paths. This is presented, in when we learn all these things in the Buddhist philosophy. This is what we learn. Okay. And then the other important point is, if you see the 5 paths, path of accumulation and path of preparation, these are not included in the 4th noble truth, the truth of the path leading to the cessation. Only the path of seeing, path of meditation, and path of no more learning. Why? We'll learn later. But something like, in the first 2, maybe I can give an analogy that they are aspiring to become aware that it's like a dream. Yet they don't see in the dream, they are not able to see that it's a dream. Path of seeing, path of meditation, and path of no more learning, these practitioners, when they're dreaming, they know they are dreaming. This is just an example, right? That they know that, okay, this is all dreamlike. They've realized it directly, and that's why they are included in the fourth noble truth. And like Gishla very clearly mentioned, that doesn't mean that the other paths are not important. We should not take it like that. There is no way to reach path of seeing if you have not achieved the path of accumulation and path of preparation. No way, right? So like the point number 7 in the slide, only the last 3 paths are included in the truth of the path leading to cessation, and they're also known as Arya paths. Arya is a Sanskrit word which are noble beings. Why noble? Because they can see reality as it is, and we learn later, what are the opposites and things like that. But this is again a very common word that you will come across. He Arya being, Arya paths. So again, it's a Sanskrit word, but translated as noble beings. And that's the etymology of the main topic that we're doing, 4 noble truths. The noble is coming from the Sanskrit word Arya. Okay, and this is a great example. What we this point is that when we do a structured course like this, we will get to these level of details. If you go for a talk, some teacher is coming to your town, or you attend an online talk these days, a lot of things are online, you will not get this level of detail. This is only in a course that you will uncover these technical details, which will make you more confident about learning things. Okay, so this completes the first set, which is the 4 noble truths related to identification, the first recitation. Now we move on to the next point, the second set, the teaching on the 4 noble truths pertaining to the practice. So once we've identified, what are we supposed to do? The truth of suffering, the truth of suffering is to be identified. Now I know, okay, this is the truth of suffering. Again, here, like I mentioned, when you see the truth of suffering, you have to go to the third level of suffering. And doesn't mean you have to ignore the first 2. But Buddha is pointing at the third one. The truth of suffering is to be identified. And truth of the cause of suffering is to be abandoned. Right? Okay. So, one of the examples I give is like somebody is trying to, become more fit. Let's say I'll go to the gym, and then they find out that, okay, it's because of my eating habits, not only necessarily exercises, but my eating habits are also not good. If you really want to become fit and reduce your weight, then you can't keep eating unhealthy food and then go to the gym. Those are contradictory. You have to take it in a holistic way. So the truth of cause of suffering. So whatever your cause is there, once you identified, it has to be abandoned. If you keep cultivating the causes, the results will come. This is the one of the mantras we recited. Om ye dharma hetu prabhava hetu teshan tathagato heavatat teshanchayo nirodha evam vadi mahashramane swaha. This is where Buddha is saying that all phenomena like suffering, they arise from their respective causes. Right? So this will cover later, but this is what is also very important. The truth of cessation is to be actualized. Like I said, if I have an illness and I really want to get rid of illness, then I have to become illness free. How? By following whatever the doctor has advised me. Medicines, or maybe enough rest, avoiding certain things, avoiding certain environment, whatever the doctor advises. So the truth of path of cessation is to be meditated upon. Here, meditation, take it in terms of you have to familiarize your mind with. Okay? All right. Next slide, please. Legula, are you there? Legula? Legula? Okay. So I think I will share while Legula is going to. Okay, maybe he's got stuck in sharing. Let me see if I can share the slide. Sorry about this. Okay. All right, I hope you can see, everybody, you can see my slide. So now we were on the previous slide, which was the truth of the path of cessation is to be meditated upon. So now the third set, this is related to the practice. Third set where Buddha said, although the truth of suffering is to be identified, there is nothing to be identified. Although the truth of cause of suffering is to be abandoned, there is nothing to be abandoned. Although the truth of cessation of suffering is to be actualized, there is nothing to be actualized. Although the truth of path of cessation is to be meditated upon, there is nothing to be meditated upon. So now we'll understand what does this mean. It sounds like a little strange, is to be identified and there's nothing to be identified. What does this mean? Right? So this has to be understood at two levels, conventional level and the ultimate level. Okay. So let's first take the conventional level. Conventional level is the learner's path and the no more learner's path. So let's go back one slide. If you see the 5 paths, path of accumulation, path of preparation, path of seeing, path of meditation, and path of no more learning. Right? So learner's path is included. All the paths, and path of no more learning is where you do not require anything to learn. You've actually you've achieved your result, right? So at conventional level, these 2 points, if you understand learners versus no more learners path. Again, there's a typo. I made the slide. It's not learner paths, it's learner paths. I'll fix it. Okay. So excuse my typos. It's a little funny. No more learner path, but anyway, it's learner's path. Okay. No more learner's path, conventional level. Okay. So here, let's say somebody who has actualized, somebody who has abandoned the afflictive obscurations. So there's no truth of suffering to be identified. Once you reach the goal, there's nothing to be identified. There's no suffering, no cause of suffering there. So from that perspective, although the truth of suffering is to be identified, there's nothing to be identified. You've achieved the goal. Although the truth of cause of suffering is to be abandoned, there's nothing to be abandoned. Although the truth of cessation of suffering is to be actualized, there's nothing to be actualized. Right? So you take it like that, that once you achieve the goal, there's nothing to be done. That's what Buddha was saying. Right? So, and then at the ultimate level, for ultimate level, Geshe-la gave a very beautiful example. Let's say, traditionally, I don't know, these days there are movie theaters with digital broadcasting and things like that. But let's say traditionally you have a projector, which is behind you, and then you have a screen, which is in front of you, right? You have a projector and you have a movie, which is in front of you, right? So the projector is projecting, the movie is coming from the projector, but movie is on the screen. Movie is not from the screen, right? You see the difference? Movie is on the screen, but not from the screen, right? When you see the screen, it's there, it's on the screen, but not from the screen, it's from the projector, right? So when you see the movie on the screen, you can say that it's not from the screen, right? It's being empty of being from the screen, right? So in the ultimate sense, it's not coming from the screen. So similarly, if so here Geshe-la then introduced like pairs, that we have to know the pairs, and these are like very detailed teachings. But right now Geshe-la is just taking very skillfully, slowly towards like the ultimate reality, objective as opposed to subjective, right? If my mind is like a projector and like I'm seeing you all on the screen right now, and it's like coming from my mind, but not from the object. How? Later. But this is the analogy. Truly as opposed to deceptively. Ultimately as opposed to conventionally. Independently as opposed to dependently. These are pairs. There are many more. But right now in this class, Geshe-la introduced 4. Okay. And then he's making very big statements, which itself like very detailed teaching is required. Everything exists. So we are not saying the movie does not exist. Movie exists on the screen, not from the screen. Everything exists, but nothing exists objectively, but subjectively. So you're looking at the pairs. Everything exists conventionally, but nothing exists ultimately, right? So this Geshe-la did not go into establishing how. He's just giving some kind of like a headline. This is a headline or this is the main thesis. Everything exists, but nothing exists objectively, but subjectively. Everything exists conventionally, but nothing exists ultimately. Right? So example of a dream again. Dream comes from the mind. If I know it's coming from the mind, how can it affect me? Why would I consider it as real? So similarly, if everything exists subjectively and nothing exists objectively, if I realize it, it will not have capacity to affect me negatively. Okay, that's the beauty about this. How we have to be patient, we have to put hard work, you have to learn, you have to ask questions when we reach there. And Gishla said that in NCC, again, emptiness is one topic. Gishla will teach us directly. We're not going to release recordings. This is something that we requested Gishla, that this is such an important topic. Can you please teach directly to NCC students? And he very kindly agreed. We have enough recordings, but then at least we are lucky that he agreed and we'll get the teaching on this. Okay. So now understanding the third set on basis of ultimate level. Although the truth of suffering is to be identified at the conventional level, there's nothing to be identified at the ultimate level. So like you are identifying this movie coming, on you are identifying that movie is on the screen, but okay, from the screen are you identifying it? No, from the screen there's nothing. Although the truth of suffering is to be identified at conventional level, there's nothing to be identified at the ultimate level. Although the truth of cause of suffering is to be abandoned at the conventional level, there's nothing to be abandoned at the ultimate level. Right? Although the truth of cessation is suffering is to be actualized at the conventional level, there's nothing to be actualized at the ultimate level. Although the truth of path of cessation is to be meditated upon at the conventional level, there's nothing to be meditated upon at the ultimate level. Okay? So that brings us to the end of the, all the points I wanted to cover. But of course, I have to go a little fast because it's almost like 5.5, 6 hours of recording. We have to condense in almost 1 hour, 15 minutes, 1 hour, 20 minutes. So for some of you, you may feel, there's too much being covered in the review class. And that's why I said, that you have to listen to Venerable Geshe-la's class. Like for some of you, let's say you had a busy last week, you could not listen and you got an opportunity to attend today's review class, then you can go back and listen to the original recordings we released. That's what I would strongly recommend. Yeah. Okay. So as usual, like when we end the class, I'd like to, open up our session for some questions. If people have questions, please feel free. You can probably raise your virtual hands. It's better for me to identify, but if you're more comfortable physical hands, we'll try and identify. Anyone? Any questions? Anyone? Virtual hands or physical hands, anything is fine. Okay, so I see virtual hand, Eric Sanchez La. Eric La, go ahead, if you can unmute yourself.
Thank you, Dipesla. My question is about the truth of the path. So normally when you go to like talks about Dharma from Lamas, they mention the Noble Eightfold Path. And I noticed like on this teaching, it wasn't even mentioned. Is this something we'll get into more detail, or maybe if you could explain a little bit how they relate?
Yeah, well, wonderful question, Eric Lau. So yes, it will be covered in detail. There is one particular topic in our NCC. I'll just tell you on the portal, the topic would be called, it's topic number 2112, 37 Harmonious Path to Enlightenment. In the 37 Harmonious Path, this eightfold is included. Now, when we are studying, like what we are studying is the, like often His Holiness mentions about, the Pali and the Sanskrit, Buddha's teachings, you can follow. So this eightfold noble path is very common in the Pali tradition, right? In the Sanskrit tradition, like I mentioned in the previous class, the renunciation practices where people like, if somebody wants to achieve Buddhahood, then the only way out is that you have to become a bodhisattva. To become a bodhisattva, first you have to generate bodhicitta, right? So for bodhicitta, it's impossible to generate bodhicitta without the renunciation practices. So you have to, the foundation, whatever that we people learn in the personal liberation, that becomes the foundation for the bodhisattva path. And it's included in that. Right now, it was a simple presentation of 5 paths, but the 37 harmonious paths are included, and Eightfold Path is also presented there, which will be through a recording from a previous Nalanda course that Gishla taught. We will cover that. Thank you, Erikla. Thank you for that question. Okay, so maybe we can take the next question. We have Ekaterina Shemchuk. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. A virtual hand, Ekaterina Shemchuk. Ekaterina, I think you've unmuted, but we can't hear you. Can you speak? Okay, so I think I can see you, Ekaterina. Can you speak? Diana, can you hear her? No, Ekaterina, we have some audio issue. Maybe we want to fix it. Maybe, yeah, you can raise your hand again. So maybe we can go to Ivan Zimnukov. Ivan Zimnukov.
Hello, Dipeshla, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes, I can hear you.
Okay,
Yes,
so I have this question. In the lecture, Gisela gives an example of a cheesecake that we see in a dream, and as soon as we wake up, we know that it's not real, and we lose any attachment. I'm not sure that it is how I feel about it. I can see a cheesecake in my dream, and then wake up and want a real one. Is this just a perfect example, or maybe I'm up to something here?
Okay. No. Oh, that's a good question, Ivana. I agree to you. What Gishla is saying that you lose the attachment to the cheesecake that you saw in the dream, right? So the attachment remains. Like if you have attachment for a cheesecake, you see a dream, and when you see the cheesecake, you want to have it, right? And when you wake up, do you at least know that, okay, what you saw, you're not going after it. You're going for the real cheesecake. That you agree? Right? So that is what Gishla is saying. That cheesecake does not have the power. The dream content does not have the power to affect you moment you wake up. Right? So that's how you can tally both. And this example is given in context of the dream. But when we realize how things exist, how they deceive us, then you can relate the dream with the real cheesecake also. Right? For example, again, the projector in the movie, right? Movie screen. If you did not know it's coming from the projector, you will keep thinking it's coming from the screen. Moment you realize that's coming from the projector, right? At least you will not say that the movie is coming from the screen. Movie is on the screen, right? So these are again examples. But that's a good observation. I would say that's a good observation. Happens to me also, that when you see a dream and like for that content, you can safely say that does not affect me, but I want another one. Okay, all right. Okay, thank you. Thank you for your question. We have Serge Ulan Uday. I hope I'm not pronouncing your name correctly, Serge Love. If not, please correct me.
Deepeshla, your mic is on mute.
Oh, so sorry. Legmala, do you see any hands?
Have Search Ulan Uday.
Yes, Sir Julanla tried. His microphone is not working. So besides that, do we have anybody else? Otherwise, okay. All right. Then I think I don't see any hands. So thank you. Let's do a delegation. Oh, we have a hand. Nina La. Nina. Go ahead, Nina La. Nina. Yeah, Nina La.
Добрый вечер. У меня вот такой вопрос будет, да? Я слушала Гешела, вот, и вот у меня вопрос, вот мир, в сансаре мы крутимся, мир желаний у нас, мир форм и мир без форм. И меня интересует вопрос, да? Вот, какой из них вот есть мир без форм, да, мир форм, да? Вот тут я немножко запуталась, когда Гешела слушала. Я поняла, что в мире желаний, в сансаре, в котором мы крутимся, этих форм нету. А в каких в других формах они есть?
Okay, Neela, thank you for your question. I'll repeat the question. Yeah, I'll repeat the question in case people were not able to catch the translation by changing the channel. So Neela is asking that about desire realm, and she wants more clarification on the form and formless realm. Okay. So basically, form and formless are specialized realms where you take birth based on your concentration practices. You do certain, like, if you've been exposed to certain meditation, let's say we're doing meditation on the breath, right? But it's just not on the breath. There's a specialized, you achieve a certain level of a concentration. And when you achieve that certain level of a concentration, like for example, somebody says that, okay, he or she has become a medical doctor. How do we know that he or she has become a medical doctor? They would study in a certain medical school or a college, then they'll give an exam, they'll do maybe a practical exam, and then some certificate is given based on a certain criteria. So similarly, it's just not any kind of, okay, I meditate and I've achieved a concentration. No, it should qualify to a certain characteristics. When you achieve that, you qualify to have achieved a mind of a form realm being. Let's say you as a human being, me as a human being, anybody from a class, we get instructions and we meditate, right? And our body is a human, but then our mind can achieve a concentration level, which is a form realm. And when this person was achieved, when they die, this particular karma of concentration will make them have birth in the form realm, whatever concentration they've achieved, first, second, third, fourth, like that. Okay, so it's a physical place, but it's based on achieving a certain level of concentration. And between the form and formless, like Geshla mentioned in the class, formless is much more refined. May not be preferred, but much more refined. It's much more subtle concentration. Okay, is it clear? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for your question. Okay, so I think we'll probably end the session today, and we'll do a short dedication, followed by the Heart Sutra mantra. Okay, Legmala, over to you. Thank you for attending, everybody.
Thank you, Deepeshla. We'll do the short and dedication prayer now. I dedicate the merit thus gathered toward the realization of the deeds and the prayers of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 3 times, and to the upholding of the doctrine of scripture and insight. May I, in all lives, through the force of this merit, never separate from the 4 wheels of the Mahayana vehicle, and accomplish all the stages of the path, renunciation, bodhicitta, perfect view, and the 2 stages, from my 2 collections, vast as space, that I have amassed from working with effect at this practice for a great length of time. May I become the chief leading Buddha for all those whose minds' wisdom eye is blinded by ignorance. Yatha Om Kate Kate Parakate Parasam Kate Buddhi Swaha Tyatha Om Kate Kate Parakate Parasam Kate Buddhi Swaha Tyatha Om Kate Kate Paragate Parasam Kate Buddhi Swaha. Thank you, Dipeshla. Thank you, Tatiana La. Thank you, Diana La. Thank you, everyone, for joining today's session. Thank you.
Thank you, Dipeshla. Thank you, Letmela. Thank you,
you,
Tatiana.
Tesla.
Everyone.
Спасибо. До свидания.
Thank you.
Thank you, Krishna.
Thank you.
Спасибо.